Kamala Harris has been ahead of Donald Trump for the second week in a row. 45% of respondents said they supported Harris, while 43% supported Trump. For the second week in a row, U.S. Vice President and Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris has been ahead of her Republican rival Donald Trump in a poll conducted by the Economist YouGov. This was reported by The Hill. The poll, conducted from August 4 to 6, showed that Kamala Harris is 2% ahead of Trump among registered voters, 45% to 43%. A week earlier, Harris had 46% support to Trump's 44% among registered voters, according to a YouGov poll. In a poll with The Economist and JW conducted 2 weeks ago, Harris was 3% behind Trump with 41% support against him. 44% for the ex-president who wants to become the next. According to the average of national polls calculated by The Hill and Decision Desk HU, Harris is barely ahead of Trump with a margin of 0.1%. On average, the vice president has 47.4% of support, compared to 47.3% for former President Trump. The Economist poll involved 413 registered voters, with a margin of error of plus or minus 3%. On July 21st, we learned this, since U.S. President Joe Biden decided to say, "Everyone withdrew from the election race with dignity." Harris has announced Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate, a vice presidential candidate. Meanwhile, Joe Biden is still at the helm and will be until January of next year, when the next head of the White House is inaugurated. Biden gives interviews now somewhat less frequently, but nevertheless, in them, he expresses uncertainty that the transfer of power in the states will take place peacefully, provided that Trump loses. And Biden does not even rule out bloodshed. U.S. President Joe Biden said he was not confident in a peaceful transfer of power if Donald Trump loses the 2024 presidential election, which will take place on November 5th, CBS News reports. This was the first interview since he announced that he would not run for re-election. He mentioned the threat posed by Donald Trump during a conversation with the chief correspondent of CBS News. When asked if he was confident that a peaceful transfer of power would take place in January 2025, Biden said he was not. If Trump loses, I am not at all sure. He means what he says. We don't take him seriously, but he is serious. All these words about how if we lose, there will be a bloodbath. Look at what they're trying to do now in local electoral districts, where people are counting votes, or putting people in states that are going to count votes, right? Of course, there are risks, given Donald Trump's always ambiguous and sometimes bizarre behavior, and he didn't just give up in 2020. Everyone remembers the Capitol storming and can expect anything from Trump supporters and other Republicans. How dangerous is this, really? We'll also discuss the West's reaction to events in Kursk and whether similar scenarios could involve Western troops entering Belarus, with Yevgeny Magdu, director of the Institute of World Policy, joining us. Mr. Yevgeny, I'm glad to see you. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Good afternoon. Please tell us how confident Joe Biden is that the transfer of power will go smoothly, and what facts lead him to this conclusion. I think that over the next 3 months, until the voting day on November 5th, 24, all the statements will be made. American politicians, even though Joseph Biden has refused to participate directly in the presidential campaign, will be subordinated to ensuring that Kamala Harris and Donald Trump get the right result during the presidential election. That is, both Democrats and Republicans will do everything in a political context.
І демократи, і республіканці будуть це робити в політичному контексті. Це, на мою думку, вже
In my opinion, this is no longer a secret, and people will act accordingly. Biden is simply taking advantage of the Capitol storming incident from the 20th century. At 21, I'm sorry, the inauguration procedure was almost disrupted. Where the protests spilled over to the walls of the legislature, and this is used to consolidate Democratic voters and to bring discord to the state of Republican voters.